Okay, ready when you are.
So are people arriving? Yes, they're still arriving. Okay, we're going to start with a short period of meditation, just a settling sit. So just get yourselves ready for that. And this really will just be a couple of minutes, so I think I'll just get started. I can still see people setting themselves up. Okay, so been doing this quite a lot, so we probably don't need a lot of leading. Just close our eyes, settle in. And one thing that can support us when we settle into a practice, especially when we're doing a retreat or an event like this, is what you could call muscle memory and the mental equivalent of that. So just allowing ourselves to settle into this space. And that grows from what we've been doing all the way through. How does it feel to be here now? This short sit, the start of this session, is also a way of making a transition. So we can be more fully present. Consciously letting go, or just at least starting to separate ourselves a bit from whatever we have been doing and thinking about and conversations or whatever we've been up to. So that we can inhabit this body, this experience, whatever that is. And then making a transition from this inward looking posture to engaging with what happens next, which is me giving a talk. So we've been on a journey, really, with this retreat, at least in terms of the topics we've covered. For the first part of it, we're really focusing on what Vidyamala called direct experience. You're experiencing more directly what it's like to, or how it is to experience the sensory input of our body, and also what the mind brings, our responses, our liking and disliking, or the Vedana responses, our thoughts. And it's just exploring how our thoughts create this film, this distance. So we've been exploring direct experience, and then we've moved on from that. And Vidyamala was talking last night about how that direct experience can be a gateway to insight. And then we moved on today, really, with Vidyamala and Sona, talking about their experience of practicing, in a very multifaceted way. Mindfulness, definitely, awareness, a part of that, relating to suffering. But then really moving on to the broader perspective that grows out of that, and which you can describe through the spiral path, for example, of faith, arising in dependence upon dukkha. And so we had very personal exploration of how that can then lead to a much more expanded perspective on life. So actually, I think particularly in what Vidyamala was saying, she joined some of the dots in ways that I thought I might have to do tonight. I was very pleased that she did it. You have not stolen my thunder, you have simplified something. And particularly, I like the image, which I think comes from Bhante actually, of being in a small cell with just a light coming through the window and this big cave or cavern or expanse beyond that. You don't even know it's there, you just see the light, but then maybe there's a door. Bhante uses that image himself in his commentary on the Lotus Sutra. And I was going to use that image, but Vidyamala did it. And, that is the difference between the two perspectives. The perspective of being in a cramped, small mental state where our whole view of the world is shaped by our thoughts, our emotions, in that cyclical way that I used a diagram to outline. And then there's a difference in a more expansive state. And we don't even know that expansive state's there. How these two things relate is not something, well, that's a question. How do these two things relate? How do we go from one to the other? And actually, that's what Vidyamala and Sona were talking about experientially. And there are different approaches, I think. So one approach is, no, we need to be really grounded in our bodies, grounded in our awareness, grounded here and now. When we go deeply into that, sufficiently deeply, then we'll naturally see its unsatisfactoriness, its impermanence, its insubstantiality, and we'll glimpse, perhaps, with the help of the framework of the Dharma, we'll start to see the reality in our own experience. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to say, we need to find a way to step outside our reality, our limited self. We need to open ourselves up. We need to open that window wider. We need to climb on a ladder and peer through it. We need more windows. We need as much of the big picture as we can get. Now, the danger with that is you become alienated. You start to live in a fantasy version of your you identify with this ideal that you haven't actually experienced, ignoring, bypassing your immediate reality. So these are two approaches, and they both have got pros and cons. I've just been reflecting on it, and one thing that came to mind was the idea of the hedgehog and the fox. So Isaiah Berlin says that Dostoevsky is a hedgehog. He's down, snuffling around. He knows the ground intimately. Tolstoy is the fox. His head's up. He's looking around. He sees the big picture. He might ignore some of the details. And these are two different temperaments. Now, Bhante's approach, Sangharakshita's approach, tends to be, I would say, more that of the fox than the hedgehog. And I think part of what some of us have found really helpful in the mindfulness approach is learning to become more of a hedgehog. I mean, some people may be that way themselves. I think, Vidyamala, you might be a hedgehog. I think you're a hedgehog. Not a porcupine, more of a Miss Tiggywinkle kind of hedgehog, I think. Very nice hedgehog. I'm more of a fox, actually, and I need the mindfulness kind of approach to stop me going off into abstractions and, you know, more intellectual things. I need to be grounded. I need to learn that. And that's one of the things that I've really learned from practicing, well, being a mindfulness teacher and then telling other people to do it and then having to do it myself, keep myself honest. The reason I was asked to do, the reason the idea came up that I would do this talk would be, and I think this may be to do with the fact that I'm a bit more of a fox, is we had a meeting when we were planning who would do what, and I'd just come back, this was only a few weeks ago, from co-leading at least part of an event at Alfoxden House, which is a new Tree Ratner property. And on that retreat, Devan and I were introducing the history of the house to the people who are working on it. It's a complete wreck. And a group of other retreatants. Now, Alfoxden is a sort of almost a mansion, I think you could call it, in North Somerset, overlooking the Bristol Channel. But it's a Georgian house. In fact, it's pre-Georgian. It's built in the early 1700s. And it's in 50 acres of ground, ancient woodland. It's an amazing place. And what's even more amazing is that William Wordsworth lived there for a year with his sister Dorothy, and Coleridge was just down the road. And what's even more amazing from that, which is a little bit of kind of literary history, and that's nice for people like me who like that sort of thing. But what happened there was that they discovered new ways of writing poetry, new ways of thinking, new ways of experiencing, new ways of being, which produced some of the greatest poetry that's ever been written. Wordsworth's only there for a year, but he wrote a good chunk of his best work there, and Coleridge wrote almost all of his best work while he was there. So we watched a performance that someone had done of The Rime of the Ancient Mariner in the panelled room at Alfoxden, where it was first read by Coleridge to the Wordsworths and the others. So I was in seventh heaven, being a lover of such things, and was leading through the retreat and looking at the poems and that sort of thing. And I came back and I said to the group that, you know, those of us who are leading the retreat, I said, you know, I just want to feed my soul. That's what I want to do. I want to feed my soul. And I've just been reflecting on the fact that meditation is an opportunity to do that, to feed my soul. Now, Buddhism says there's no soul, no fixed soul. This is the soul of the poets, not the soul of the theologians. Soul meaning something deep within us that feels like it's the more authentic, the deeper part of myself. So we've moved in the course of the last few days from looking at our immediate experience, not leaving it behind, into this more expansive sense. And the question, how do these two relate to each other? So what I'm going to do is talk about a poem called Tintern Abbey, which is one of Wordsworth's greatest poems, one of his most famous poems. To introduce it, just before introducing it, I'm going to tell you about Wordsworth's meditation method. Wordsworth was, in fact, quite a profound practitioner of meditation. He described his meditation teaching. So, in the preface to the Lyrical Ballads was the volume of poetry which was produced at the end of 1798, which was the end of the time when they were at Alfoxden, and is generally said to be the most important volume of poetry ever produced in English anyway. He wrote, in the second edition of it, he wrote a preface which has become very, very famous in terms of, thinking about what poetry is and how it works. So just going to read it to you, read to you a section, which is actually quite a famous section. He says this: "I have said that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility." So that's a very famous phrase, emotion recollected in tranquility. Then he goes on, that's usually where the quote ends. "The emotion is contemplated till, by a species of reaction, the tranquility gradually disappears, and an emotion kindred to that which was before the subject of contemplation is gradually produced, and does itself actually exist in the mind. In this mood, successful composition generally begins, and in a mood similar to this, it is carried on." It's a bit complicated, isn't it? I'll just read it again. So that crucial bit: emotion, recollect, and tranquility. Okay, so the emotion. So what happens is this. First of all, you go off into nature. You might do something else, like talk to a friend, look at something else that's beautiful. But Wordsworth is generally nature. So you go into nature and you have an emotion in the moment. Now, that's only the start of it. It's not all about being in the moment. What you then do is you go away, and sometime later you recollect the emotion. The emotion is contemplated till, by a species of reaction, the tranquility gradually disappears. So you become calm, you bring this object in, this inspiring image in, this inspiring memory. The tranquility disappears. Okay, this may sound like we're reading the Pali Canon now, but he says, an emotion kindred to that which was before the subject of contemplation is gradually produced and does itself actually exist in the mind. So in other words, you rekindle something, but it's very important that you go through the process of tranquility before you come to the contemplating the emotion, and then it's something else. And there are parallels to this in some Buddhist meditation teaching. You have an image, you move away from the image, and then you create your own version of the image. As you become absorbed in the image, something comes through that image. Some source of inspiration comes through the image. This is part of the theory behind sadhana practice. Okay, so I'm gonna, don't take too long doing this. So it's a longish poem. I'm just gonna get into it. And one reason I've chosen this poem is that Tintern Abbey is not that far from Adhisthana, maybe 20 miles. And what's more, what's described isn't actually Tintern Abbey at all. It's lines composed above Tintern Abbey. And what that probably means is upstream of Tintern Abbey in a place called Simon's Yat. So Tintern Abbey is actually set in Simmons Yat, Vidyamala. I know this is one of your favourite places. So this is all about Simmons Yat. And I think it's worth reading simply because this is an Adhisthana retreat. I hope you all remember that Dharma appeal that was made to help support Adhisthana. And it's one of the greatest poems in English. Now, it goes like this. On revisiting the banks of the Wye during a tour, July 13th, 1798, so Wordsworth had just left Alfoxden. He and Dorothy went from Alfoxden, which is in North Somerset, spent a few days in Bristol, and then they went on a walking tour of the Wye Valley. For those of you who don't know English, it's actually Welsh geography, it's just over the border. It's a beautiful area, just on the border between England and Wales. And he's there and he immediately thinks back. So what I'm going to do is read, it's in sections. I'm going to read a section and then I'm going to unpack it a little bit. And I'm going to keep my eye on the clock. 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. And again, I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with an inland murmur. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs, which on a wild, secluded scene impress the thoughts of more deep seclusion and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season, with their unripe fruits among the woods and copses, lose themselves, nor with their green and simple hue disturb the wild green landscape. Once again, I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms, green to their very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice, as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave, where by his fire the hermit sits alone. So he's describing, he's remembering having been there 5 years earlier. He's 28. He remembers what it's like when he was 23. It's a wild, secluded scene, so it has to be Simmons Yat and not the rolling pastoral imagery of Tintern Abbey. The Abbey isn't mentioned. Despite being in the title, this is not a poem about the decay of Christianity. This is a poem about nature, about what you see with your eyes and what you remember. Its immediate surroundings are these sharp cliffs, and then there's a long vista of farms and hedgerows and so on. Now, memory comes in. Though absent long, these forms of beauty have not been to me as in a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft in lonely rooms. And it's worth saying that Wordsworth had a difficult time between these two visits to the Wye Valley. I won't go into it, but he has. And but oft in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them in hours of weariness sensations sweet, felt in the blood and along the heart. Isn't that beautiful? Felt in the blood, sensations sweet, felt in the blood and along the heart. And passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. Feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as may have had no trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Just going to pause there now. So what he's saying is that these scenes that he's witnessed, these beautiful scenes that moved him very deeply in the past, over the past 5 years, he's brought them back to his mind and they've kept him sane. In fact, they've done more than that. They have, he's felt them in his blood and along his heart, and he's connected with his purer mind and restored him with tranquility. And now he also says, and this is very subtle, feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as may have had no trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life. So there are even the things that we don't remember, if they've affected us deeply enough, can influence a part of our life. And the part is, the best part of our life, is our little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. And actually, if we didn't get anything else from this poem, let's just get this line. But it's odd, isn't it? You know, unremembered pleasure prompts unremembered acts. So this level of life that goes on with no one really noticing it. But that's where virtue exists. That's the best part of our lives. Anyway, nor less, I trust, to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime. That blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. That serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on until the breath of this corporeal flame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. How was your meditation practice today? So he's describing these experiences of deep, of profound dhyana, and the kind of dhyana that's been stimulated by his contact with nature, that feels like it's not just an elevated state. It feels like, well, he loses sense of the breath of this corporeal flame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended. We are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. So this is what we need to remember about ourselves, as well as our capacity to really be in the present moment with our body, thoughts, and feelings. We also have the capacity to be a living soul. And when we are, we perhaps, with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. So that's why insight isn't just a matter of noticing how you construct a sense of self. And that's why dhyana and beauty and joy are not irrelevant to spiritual life. Because when we can absorb ourselves into them, the veil is thinner. Okay. I'm just going to read through the next bit without, I don't want to, it'll take too long if I discuss everything. So I'll just keep going. If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless daylight, when the fretful stir unprofitable and the fever of the world hang upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit have I turned to thee, O sylvan why, thou wanderer through the woods, how often has my spirit turned to thee? So it sustains him. And now, with gleams of half-extinguished thought, with many recognitions dim and faint, and somewhat of a sad perplexity, the picture of the mind revives again. While here I stand, not only with a sense of present pleasure, but with the pleasing thoughts that in this moment There is life and food for future years. Is he appropriating this? Oh, this is nice. This will sustain me in the future. Maybe. And so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was when first I came amongst these hills. And he didn't have any of those thoughts when he was younger. When like a roe I bounded o'er the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams, wherever nature led. More like a man flying from something he dreads, the one who sought the thing he loves. For nature then, the coarsest pleasures of my boyish days and their glad animal movements all gone by, to me was all in all. I cannot paint what then I was. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colours and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling and a love that had no need of a remoter charm by thought supplied or any interest unborrowed from the eye. So he's when he was 23, he was completely in his senses, completely enraptured by nature. He's not like that anymore. He's got old. He's 28. And other things have happened. Life's happened to him. So is it all about being completely in the present moment with this intensity? That time is past, he says. See, now he's thinking, oh no, I'll store this up for the future. Is that bad? That time is past and all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures. He doesn't think that's a bad thing. Not for this faint eye, nor mourn, nor murmur. Other gifts have followed. For such loss, I would believe abundant recompense. Now I'm going to just pause. So what he's saying is that something has happened that's actually matured him. Even if he's not quite so viscerally alive in a way. For I have learned to look on nature, not in the hour, as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing sometimes the still, sad music of humanity, nor harsh, nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. Okay? For I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. So he's sobered. He has seen the sufferings of the world, of life. And he listens to it like music. The still, sad music of humanity. The still, sad music of humanity. The still music of humanity. The music of humanity. The sad music of humanity. The still, sad music of humanity. And he regards it like Avalokiteshvara, who listens to the cries of the world. And it calms him down, it chastens and subdues him. And then something else happens. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts. What is this presence? A sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns and the round ocean and the living air and the blue sky and in the mind of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of thought, and rolls through all things. Okay, pause there. I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts. Just contemplate that. Disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts. Isn't it thoughts, or is it a sense? Is it a sense? Well, it's a sense sublime of something. Something? What's what? Something. Something far more deeply interfused, which I think in this context, it has a connotation of interconnected, but it really means immanent. It's there in everything, like Spinoza said, and Coleridge after him. Something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns. Not just a sunset. Its dwelling is the light of setting suns. And the round ocean with all its depths. And the living air, not just the air, the living air. And the blue sky. And in the mind of man. A motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of thought, and rolls through all things. What is this motion? What is this spirit? What is it that we touch when we go deeply enough? We find something so much bigger than ourselves. Is it God? Not for Wordsworth. Even though he's writing in 1798, no. Even though he's writing a poem called Tintern Abbey, oh no. He doesn't really want to say what it is. Something that maintains all beings, situated throughout space, so long as all have not attained to peace. It's a suprapersonal force. Something bigger than him. For Wordsworth, actually, it's nature. That's his word for it. But people have ever since wondered whether nature is another word for man and the mind, or whether it really is nature. I mean, it's certainly the natural world. Therefore, am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from this green earth, and of all the mighty world of ear and eye, both what they half create and what perceive, well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart, and soul of my moral being. So Wordsworth goes for refuge to nature. It's not a bad thing to do, actually, if you're Wordsworth. It maybe didn't sustain him through his life. I'm not going to read the rest of the poem, because I think that's time. But what the journey that even up to this point Wordsworth's taken us on is from this really visceral immersion in the realm of the senses, the immediate, through the process of recollecting it, contemplating it, leaving aside, as he says in the preface, leaving aside the time when it happened and dwelling on the remembered experience that's there in his heart. Going deeper into that remembered experience, contemplating it, bringing it together with the wisdom of experience, the wisdom that says, that knows the still, or hears the still, sad music of humanity. Compassion. And that opens him to a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man. Is it outside us? Is it inside us? So one day, Adhisthana people, let's have an Adhisthana event at Simmons Yat. We're going to have a Cardiff Buddhist Centre event at Simmons Yat. And many more of them at Alfox, no doubt. And with that, I'm going to finish. And then we'll take a short break. And then Vidyamala will lead a short puja.
Thank you so much, Vishvapani. I feel my soul has been fed just listening to you. Wonderful. So what's the time? So if we come back, maybe just in about 4 minutes or something, just to stretch. So not a proper bait, not a proper long thing. I'm just going to relocate to the shrine room.
Right.
Solar. Do I need to get this going again? How long were you going to be? Can you hear me? Oh, oops, telling again. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sit down.
So we had a bit of feedback situation there, as you should have noticed.
Yeah. So, who do you want to see?
Can they hear me? I can't see anything, so I've got the wrong glasses on.
Can you talk?
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that working?
Can you hear her?
Yeah, loud and
Yes,
clear.
perfectly.
3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's all fine.
Vishvapani, can you hear Vidyamala?
Yes.
No, it's not working. I've got to make sure the right mic's on here.
I could hear her.
We can hear you.
Okay, can you hear now?
No problem with anything technical.
Oh, God.
There's someone's in the chat now, Sana.
What?
There's a chat thing. What does that say?
Yeah, it's working. Don't worry.
Right, it's working. What does that mean?
If they can hear us.
I felt, oh, it's Wordsworth.
Vidyamala Chitta, can you let us know if you can hear us?
Well, I can
please?
see the microphone going up.
I can hear you really well.
We can
Perfectly. Yeah.
stop.
Can you say something, Vimla Chitta?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Really brilliantly.
Oh, that is splendid.
No problem at all.
I think you should just get on with it because
No, time has passed.
no one else is having any problems.
Okay. Just anyway, that's just thing. Just got to channel Wordsworth. Okay, so we're going to do a threefold puja, and after the first verse, we're going to have a reading from Dharma Samudra about loving kindness. Short reading from the Itivutika, and then we'll just go straight through to the end of the puja. So really, it's just some devotional closing words to mark the end of the day. First of all, I'm going to salute the shrine, and I'll do it so you've got time to do it at home to our shrine or your own shrine.
Or I can do it in unison with you.
I'm going to do it sitting down.
Or I can do it in call and response.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo
Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Om. Om.
Om.
The threefold puja. Again, I'll do it with leaving space for you to recite the verses if you want to. First of all, opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha,
We reverence the Buddha,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma,
We reverence the Dharma,
the teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides.
And now we'll have the reading from Dana Sumitra. If you just unmute yourself, Dana Sumitra.
None of the means employed to acquire religious merit has a 16th part of the value of loving kindness. Loving kindness, which is freedom of heart, absorbs them all. It glows, it shines, it blazes forth. And in the same way, as the light of all the stars has not a 16th part of the value of the moonlight, but the moonlight absorbs it and glows and shines and blazes forth. In the same way, none of the means employed to acquire religious merit has a 16th part of the value of loving kindness. Loving kindness, which is freedom of heart, absorbs them. It glows, it shines, it blazes forth. And in the same way, as at the end of the rainy season, the sun, rising into the clear and cloudless sky, banishes all the dark spaces and glows and shines and blazes forth. In the same way again, as at night's end, the morning star glows and shines and blazes forth. So none of the means employed to acquire religious merit has a 16th part of the value of loving kindness. Loving kindness, which is freedom of heart, absorbs them. It glows, it shines, it blazes forth.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born
The Buddha was born
as we are born.
as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it
with body, speech, and mind
with body, speech, and mind
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects,
the path in all its stages.
the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha
and aspire to follow it.
and aspire to follow it.
The fellowship of those who tread the way,
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
as one by one,
As one by one,
we make our own commitment,
we make our own commitment,
an ever widening circle.
an ever widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer flowers,
we offer flowers,
flowers that today
flowers that today
are fresh and sweetly blooming,
are fresh and sweetly blooming,
flowers that tomorrow
flowers that tomorrow
are faded and fallen.
are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too,
Our bodies too,
like flowers,
like flowers,
will pass away.
will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer candles
we offer candles.
to him who is the light.
To him who is the light,
We offer light
we offer light.
from his greater lamp.
From his greater lamp,
A lesser lamp we light within us.
a lesser lamp we light within us.
the lamp of Bodhi,
the lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life,
The fragrance of the perfect life,
sweeter than incense,
sweeter than incense,
spreads in all directions
spreads in all directions
throughout the world.
throughout the world.
Just sitting quietly for a couple of minutes to conclude the day, absorbing everything that we've experienced today. Brings the day to an end, and I hope you all sleep well, and see you back in the morning at 7 o'clock in the Adhisthana Shrine Room, or 8 o'clock, or 10:30. No, 10:45.